Well, hello, welcome to irishracing.com's Formscan preview of the 2023 Grand National from Aintree, the biggest race in National Hunt Racing. I think it's fair to say the most eluding spectacle and probably the most difficult race to actually find the winner in. But we're going to try to do that for you today with our experts, Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley. Now, Ed, I'll start with you as well. Like I mentioned before, the spectacle of the Grand National. I mean, is it one of those races that you just most look forward to watching every year?
Yes, it is. It's a proper buzz race, isn't it? I mean, there are other races which are perhaps more for purists, like the Cheltenham Gold Cup, for example, or, you know, a Champion Hurdle or a King George. Those are themselves elite Grade 1 races. But there's something about this, isn't there? The 40 runners, the buzz, odds on there'll be a full start, there'll be carnage, there'll be all sorts of arguing amongst the jockeys. But it's a heritage, isn't it? It's a tradition. And it's a race, as you say, that when they all come into line at the start, and you look over those first few fences, it's a real buzz, a real spectacle, and one I'm thoroughly looking forward to.
And Stephen, for you as well, from a betting point of view, again, like I touched on, it's a bit tricky to find the winner. But kind of what kind of angles are you looking for from a punting point of view?
Well, I love this race. I mean, it's the one race, Ed's absolutely right. You do actually get excited and feel very nervous at the start of the Grand National, because I mean, I actually hope it's very big for racing at the minute. There's a lot of focus on the sport for the wrong reasons, and we really could do with a carnage-free, no fatalities Grand National this year. From a betting point of view, I mean, I must admit, I don't think I've backed the winner of this since Mr. Frisk, and I was probably too young to be allowed to have a bet then. Yeah, well, no, actually, I wasn't. But anyway, that's another story. But the thing I used to like with the Grand National years ago is you could bet on the number of finishes, and it was in the sort of pre-internet age where now everyone knows everything, what the weather's doing, how many millimetres have fallen, and it wasn't that sort of time. And they used to price up the number of finishes, and I remember one year I think Red Marauder won. And something like under 21 finishers was sort of 6-4 against a week before. So, and it was literally just get whatever you could get on. Completely the wrong price. I mean, now it'd be something like probably about 10-1 on. So there are specials and angles, but I can't pretend, Joe, that it's a race I've had fantastic financial success. So maybe we'll change it this year.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, let's bring up the course as well, because I mean that is obviously the main feature of the Grand National. It is unique in how obviously there's quite a long distance and some of the most unique fences in all of racing as well. Ed, talk us through kind of what kind of horses do you actually expect to do well here in the Grand National itself?
Well, you've got to be able to jump. Look, I mean, we've kind of had this chat on other shows, haven't we? That the national fences aren't the days of the 1960s where they were about 3 times the height, and if you jumped into one, you probably bounced back the same side you tried to take off from. Look, they're a lot softer now. That is a fact. But as a consequence, you speak to a lot of jockeys. We spoke, didn't we, to Ben Pauling earlier in the season. He'd been speaking to lots of Daryl Jacob, and he said that the makeup of the race has changed as a consequence in that they do go a couple of yards faster. And even Daryl Jacob was saying that compared to when he started riding 20 years ago, they absolutely fly over those first 2 or 3 fences. So you do need the days of the old-fashioned 6-mile plodder are perhaps slightly being forgotten now. I think we'll come on to that later. The class of the race is totally different now. You've got horses who are fringe Gold Cup class running in it, if you see what I'm saying. And it just the whole makeup of the race, I think they're not going to hang around. It's going to be helter-skelter over the first few fences. And look, you still need to jump, but look, there is still that thing we can never quantify, Joe, and that is a bit of luck in running, especially if you're on a hold-up performer. The likes of, if you're a CORACH RAMBLER fan, it's 6-7-1. Yes, he might be on the horse who's officially £10 well in. If you look at both his Cheltenham Festival wins, he's come from last to first. You are very much a hostage for fortune if you're last of 40 runners, coming into the second circuit, or last of the field coming into the second circuit, trying to weave your way through those traffic problems. It's an unknown which you can't really ever kind of adjust or quantify for. So, yeah, you need to jump. I think you need a little bit more pace than you used to have to a few years ago. And all in all, I wouldn't mind being on someone up there at the head of affairs. You could bowl along and stay out the way of any potential carnage that could come their way.
And Eddie mentioned there probably won't be many plodders going for this one this year. So Stephen, could you just say about the conditions at Aintree tomorrow from the day of filming, and what do you expect it to be like?
Well, certainly on the first day, it was good to soft, really, wasn't it? No worse, especially the chase course. I mean, they were flying round. I mean, there was a going stick reading earlier in the week. I'm not sure where that came from, and they've had rain since. So I think it's going to be good soft. I mean, the national course, they'll water it. This is on now. We're recording this on Friday, chaps, aren't we? And there is rain forecast, but only like passing showers. So she will water on Friday night. There's no way in the world they'll let them run this national on good ground. So it'll be nearly soft, good to soft, I suspect. Safe ground. It's what you want. You don't want extremes. I mean, talk about Mr. Frisk. He won. It was literally like the Lord's cricket pitch when he won. He went off 5 furlong pace and they just flew round. You never see a race like that ever again because it is still a bit of a test of stamina. But that being said, Ed's absolutely right. The one thing that's changed punting wise is there aren't 10 5,000 to 1 chances anymore. It's quite a compressed handicap, generally speaking, although we have got one down the bottom who's a stoner more out the weights this time. But there's not many horses, even the 100 to 1 chances have all won good staying handicaps, basically. They're not selling hurdlers running around Hexham who the Major Chumley Warner wants to enter in the race anymore. So it is a much harder race for punters. I mean, we've had our share of upsets in the last decade or so. I mean, Noble Yates was 50 to 1 last year. A real proper old-fashioned result for bookmakers. That was a virtual Skinner, if you can get one. I personally think, looking at this year, I know they've tried to sort of smuggle CORACH RAMBLER into like 6 to 1. It's 12 to 1 the field at least. It'll be all of that on Betfair. The public will declare for a couple of horses that will end up being much shorter by the off, but I think it's a very, very hard race. And quickly, if you're going to play, you've got to play, of course. I've seen 7 places. There might be 8 on the day. So find those bookmakers who are giving you a bit of a chance.
All right, well, that covers it quite nicely, the kind of general chit-chat, but let's get into it. Let's get into the card for 2023's edition of the Grand National. So, Stephen, you're going to start us through the first 3, and then over to Ed, the next 3, and we're going to go through the whole card like that way. So, yeah, Stephen, take us away in. You're actually looking at your pick for the race as well.
Yeah, it's actually the betting expert, Knapp. So, we're not, he's an old one, but he's a good one any second. Now he's got loads of course form, which I still like at Aintree. I know it's a much easier test now. The last 2 years, in 2021, he was very unlucky. He ended up in a poor spot, travelling really strongly. And last year, I mean, he just caught a handicap tartar in Noble Yates, who has franked the form since. He's £11 better off with that rival for a couple of lengths, and I think he'll reverse the form. He comes here fresh, which is another massive positive at Aintree. He won that graded race at Navan in March. He's only run 3 times this season. They've not messed about with him. He's been kept for this race. Now, he has got top weight, and I know a lot of people have dismissed him. He's 11, career high mark. No horse has won from this sort of weight since Red Rum, I think, in 1940. That sort of thing. So he's got to defy history. But I think he's bound to give his running, and he's gone out to sort of bigger than 20 on the exchange. So you're going to get 16, 6, 7, 8 places. I think you're bound to get a really good run for your money. If the ground's good to soft, I think that'll suit him. I think that'll help him get home. He hasn't quite got home from the elbow the last couple of years. He's been tired, but I think he'll last a lot longer on slightly better ground. So he is my betting expert, Knapp. I think he's well worth backing, or certainly having in a package of horses you back each way. Number 2, our graphics man that's fantastic. Number 2, Noble Yates, won it last year. Now I think Noble Yates, I'm more inclined against him. He's now something like half the price of any second now. Obviously, he's trained by a genius in Emmett Mullins. He was 50 to 1 last year. He's now £19 higher, which definitely makes life a lot harder. And I think the main negative for him is I think he had a very hard race in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. Now, we've already seen at Aintree this week, they can bounce back from Cheltenham, runs at Cheltenham and win. We saw Shishkin win on Thursday. So maybe with the 4-week, 5-week gap, it's not such a bad thing. But I'd much sooner have missed Cheltenham than run at Cheltenham, personally. So I think Noble Yates is a bad price. I mean, he's got the form in the book. He's young enough to keep on improving. I'm sure he'll run well, but I think there might be 5 or 6 who are stronger than him from the last. Number 3 is GALVIN. I respect Galvin's claims. I just not. I don't think there's any stamina doubts with him. I think he run over 3 miles 6, hasn't he? And he's been fairly sparingly raced over extreme distances. He ran perfectly well the other day at Cheltenham when finishing second behind Delta Work. One slight negative could be Davy Russell, who has already retired and come back. And I don't think he rode very well at the Cheltenham Festival. I don't think it's controversial to say that. I don't think Elliot was too pleased with a couple of the rides he got. He's been injured since. I think he had another fall, and he's coming back to ride at Aintree, and then that'll be that, I think. So I don't think his presence, although he's a brilliant jockey, he's been one of the best jockeys of the last 15, 20 years, Davy Russell. I'm not sure you're catching him at his peak. So maybe that's a slight negative.
But yeah, over to Ed, because I know you've actually got a fancy on Galvin. So yeah, maybe just a quick comment on Galvin before we're going on to your selection, or your horses you're going to cover.
Yeah, all fair points, Joe. Yeah, I agree with Stephen on a lot of that. Galvin, I don't think he'll be found wanting for stamina. Winner at the Cheltenham Festival over 3-6, and then ran a really nice race on deep ground last time out in the cross country at Cheltenham, where Gordon Elliott very much said that they were using that as a springboard for the Grand National. He's 20-1. I take Stephen's point with Davy Russell, but if he sit still and stay on for 2 circuits or so, then we're in with a chance. But I think Galvin confirmed stamina in the locker, big weight. Let's not forget, beat A Plus Tard last season and went on to win a Gold Cup. He's no mug at all with a lot of back class. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Galvin. Moving on to horse number 4, Fury Road, who is a smart sort on his day. If you go back to his third to Galopin de Champ at Leopardstown in February, that form subsequently does read very well. However, I would have huge stamina doubts about Fury Road. In fact, Connections actually dropped him back from the staying chase scene to the Ryanair chase scene over 2.5 miles on the count they didn't think he'd see out the Gold Cup trip. Well, if you don't think he's going to see out a Gold Cup trip, 4.25 miles has got to be a worry. I think odds of around 66-1 are therefore factored into it, given he also has a lot of weight. So big stamina doubts for me, no doubting his class there with Fury Road. Horse number 5, the big dog, Peter Fahey, Aidan Coleman, a horse who really clicked into gear in the autumn, winning in Ireland before finishing third in the Welsh Grand National, where trying to concede more or less 2 stone to the winner, 2 Amigos on that day, was only beaten 6 lengths. That was a mighty run in defeat, it has to be said. Another horse, I think, who's got plenty of stamina in abundance. The only problem you would have, or the main issue, would be the preparation, because since that aforementioned run in the Welsh Grand National, he's had the 1 spin, which was in that Irish Gold Cup back at Leopardstown in February, and he took a fall. So not ideal preparation coming into a race where pretty much you're being asked the biggest test of jumping you've got all season. But no doubting his stamina. I think if with a clear round, he's got to come into the shake-up from an each-way point of view. Horse number 6, Capodanno, Danny Mullins on board for Willie Mullins. Second season chaser here, who's shown some pretty smart form so far this season, including last season, I should say, including when winning the Grade 1 at the Punchestown Festival. Only seen the once so far this season, which was a belated comeback at Gorham Park in February when finishing third to Janadil. I'm no paddock judge, but I'm told he was carrying plenty of condition on that occasion and ought to come forward a lot for that outing. He'll need to, with 11.5 on his back, and also has question marks over stamina as well. He does have that 1 win over the 3 miles. So my mind looks as though he didn't quite get home when 4th to Long Press in the Brown Advisory last season at the Cheltenham Festival. So again, I'd put him in a similar category to Fury Road, in the sense that I think he's a horse of a lot of class, but whether he can get the 4.25 miles is open to debate.
I've got to say as well, maybe for the general public newbies to betting on horse racing, obviously the name, the big dog, clearly stands out for me. But Stephen, over to you, horse number 7, Delta Work.
Yeah, number 7, Delta Work. I mean, my opinion about Delta Work is I suspect he's going to start favourite, and I think perhaps he is probably something like the 10 or 12-1 favourite on form. He's a tough, reliable, consistent stayer. He's got an amazing career record. He's had 31 races at the age of 10. He's actually won 12 of them. He's 9 from 20 over fences. He's run once in the Grand National. Last year, he finished a remote third behind the 2 we've already mentioned, Noble Yates and any second now. He was 20 lengths behind any second. Now he's got a big weights pull, to be fair to him, which is a help. And he comes here on the back of winning the cross country at the Cheltenham Festival. And Keith Donoghue was interviewed recently, I think this week I've seen, and he said he actually won really readily pulling a bus the cross country. I think he could have gone round again. And if you watch his run back at Aintree in last year's Grand National, he looked a complete flop on the first circuit. He was slow, he made a few mistakes, he was propping, and he got himself in a poor position. But the second circuit, he really warmed to his task, and backers will be hoping that's what he does from the start. If he's able to hold a pitch prominent in the first 10 in what's bound to be a really strongly run race, there's no stamina doubts with Delta Work. The only thing I think that's got wrong with Delta Work, he has now got to his price. I mean, I'm not rushing to take 8 or 9 to 1 about horses in this kind of race, but I think his claims are probably very high up the pecking order. It's just his price. Number 8, Sam Brown, the other end of this spectrum. He's had a wind operation. Anthony Honeyball's going a lot better now than at any other stage during the winter. His horses are really flying. That's the positives. The negatives are, I think Sam Brown needs heavy ground to be at his best. He won the handicap before the National on this card last year. So Aintree's no problem, but I think he needs proper testing ground. He's not really been at his best this season. He's been fairly highly tried. I think he's a 3-figure price. I think that's probably right. I suspect he'll get round. He's the sort of horse might finish 10th. He's a sound enough jumper when he gets into a rhythm. And number 9, Lifetime Ambition, who's a sort of mixed bag, Jessica Harrington. 11 runs over fences, 2 wins. I've got a big stamina question mark. I don't think he's ever been tried beyond 3 mile 1. And obviously you're up to 4 mile 2 here on probably watered ground. He'd have to be a very doubtful stayer. If you're looking to back him, the positives, well, he finished 4th in the Grand Sefton over 2 mile 5 here last year in November. He jumped well, he travelled well. He didn't quite get home, but he ran a good race. So the fences shouldn't be any problem. But for me, I don't think he'll stay. And I think 25 to 1's too short.
Fair enough. Over to Ed for horse number 10.
Yeah, horse number 10, carefully selected, Willie Mullins. The jockey of the moment, young Michael O'Sullivan in the saddle, of course. Won with Marine Nationale, didn't he, in the Supreme Novices. And he gets the ride here on a horse. So again, I don't think it's a forlorn hope. A very lightly raced for an 11-year-old. Not a horse with many miles on the clock, has not been the easiest to train, according to his handler, but does have a touch of class and showed real guts, I thought, to win the Taistes chase at Gorham Park back in January. Clearly very at home when the mud is flying. That is just something to bear in mind. A lot of very good form on soft ground, but I didn't think it was all that bad a run when finishing 4th to Kemboy in the Bobby Joe chase last time out. Probably have him spot on for this. Excellent pilot on board. Confirmed stamina with this horse. Of those at bigger prices, I think he's a bit of a live wire for each way players. Again, check your each way terms. I think there are others in here have probably got more leading claims or pressing claims to win it, but it wouldn't shock me if at least he was playing a part in this from a place perspective. Horse number 11, Cocoa Beach. Gordon Elliott with obviously a very strong hand in this race. Harry Cobden coming in for the ride here on this very smart 8-year-old. Again, one of the younger types in the race, but ultimately was very well held in this race 12 months ago. Was beaten the best part of 70 lengths on that occasion. So has question marks on last year's running to try and overturn that form, and also is £5 higher. So purely on last year's running, it has it all to do, but does arrive here on the back of a pretty convincing success at Punchestown last time out. So mixed signals in regards to that one there. And then moving on, Longhouse Poet. Of course, you shaped up really well for a long way in this race 12 months ago. Looked as though he was going to win it one stage before fading away to 6th in the closing stages. Be interesting if they change the tactics with this Martin Brazil trained 9-year-old. Maybe he'll be ridden with a little bit more patience. Had a nice little tune-up last month at Down Royal to get him spot on for this. He's got 34 lengths to find with Noble Yates. Obviously, he has a healthy pull at the weights from last year, but I just thought he didn't get home for my mind. So whether they try and ride him a little bit more conservatively will be fascinating to see. But that's Longhouse Poet. Clearly comes here with each way claims.
And over to Stephen then for another Cheltenham Festival winner, number 13.
Yeah, number 13, Galliard de Mesnil, going to be very popular with the public, I would imagine. A, it's a grey. B, Willie Mullins and Paul Townend team up, and they're in blistering form. They have been all year, basically. Galliard de Mesnil, I thought he did very well to win the National Hunt Chase last time out. He was one of those, it was pounds, shillings and pence job. 11 to 10 favourite, he wound up, everyone's banker. And I think he was ridden as though he was an absolute certainty. He was a little bit out of his ground. He made a couple of mistakes and he looked in big trouble. Turning for home. A horse fell and let him in. He powered home to beat Chemical Energy after loss. So I think the positives are he's trained by a genius. He's the right sort of age. He's got a good record, 2 from 9 over fences. There should still be more to come. I think the negatives are maybe his jumping, and B, he's never run at Aintree before, which is a concern over these fences. I quite like to have had a bit of experience over them, and he's going to be held up, which is, again, not always the right place to be if there's any trouble falling back through the field. So I respect his claims. I don't think I could take 14 to 1. I mean, he's a shorter price now than any second now who's got the Aintree form in the book. So I think he's a big runner, but doesn't make any appeal at the prices. Number 14 is Durasso, Joseph O'Brien, a veteran. He's run 41 times, which wouldn't be your ideal profile for a Grand National winner. He's never tried beyond 3 miles in his whole career. So either they've got something dramatically wrong to suddenly try 4 mile 2 at his time of life. I'd be surprised if he was good enough. He looks a 3-figure price. If he wins, the bookmakers will be waving their race cards in the air for a very long time. Number 15, Limailos. Now, ex-Tim Vaughan, a much improved model for Dan Skelton. And apparently Dan says he's never had him better. When he got beat last time at Kelso, he did too much too soon. It was one of Harry's rides where he gets a bit of a rush of blood and does too much in the middle of the race and burst the horse really. He got tired and pegged after the last. They thought he was about 75% fit for that run. They'd left him short. He's going to be 100% fit. The only thing I'll say, and I'll be interested to see what Ed thinks, I know he likes Limailos. I don't think Limailos will stay. I mean, he's never gone beyond 3 mile 2. And when he won at Newbury, he travelled like a dream, and I thought he was absolutely unconscious on the run-in at Newbury. So I've got big stamina doubts about Limailos. I think he's probably one of the best handicapped horses in the race, and he's trained by a genius, but stamina, a big question mark.
Well, Ed, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can see the point of view, but I always go by the angle. I suppose you don't know until you've tried it, do they? We saw out 3.25 miles at Newbury very well. I don't know whether he was just idling in front or whether he was getting pretty tired. It's hard to tell, isn't it? I don't think he's the type of horse who finds a great deal when he hits the front. We saw a little bit of that at Kelso in his warm-up run where he 2 out. He thought he was going to win by half the track and then kind of ran a bit sideways. But he's clearly got his quirks. Stamina is a question mark because we don't know. But I just think he's had the perfect prep. Everything he's done up to 3.25 miles so far suggests he's going to be a player here. He goes on any ground and the yard are flying. So I'm hoping from an each way point of view, at least anyway, Harry Scouts could smuggle him into contention.
All right, let's take us through to the next horse then, Ed, number 16, another Gordon Elliott charge.
Yeah, Ascari at 10. He has. He's mob-handed here. Ascari at 10 looks far-fetched to see Ascari at 10 winning, to be blunt. Was beaten the length of the home straight in the Grand National 12 months ago and has done very little this season to kind of change your mind on why he would run significantly better. Pulled up at the Cheltenham Festival when last seen. And I think off the top of my head, he arrives here off a similar mark, maybe £1 lower than last year. But as I said, he was beaten 75 lengths, odds of 125 to 1. I tell you all you need to know. Horse 17, the Big Breakaway. Now, this is a real enigmatic sort who I do think is a bit of a law unto himself. We saw that at the Cheltenham Festival last time out where he made a mistake early doors in the Ultima and then seemed to throw the toys out the pram. However, on the running of his penultimate start, he would have half a squeak in getting involved in this. He was second in the Welsh Grand National. Let's not forget, with the big dog in behind him on that occasion. And he was giving, the Big Breakaway was giving nearly 2 stone to the two amigos. Ran an absolute stormer to be runner-up over 3 miles, 6.5 furlongs on soft on that occasion. Beaten a length and a quarter. If he turned up in that form, he would have to have a chance here, because that was the biggest question of stamina he was ever presented, and on the figures he ran his best ever race. So I do think if the reins did arrive, that would help him. He is more in the old-fashioned plodder mode here. The blinkers are on for the first time. If they can sharpen him up, he's got to have a squeak. But as I say, those form figures tell you all you need to know there, Joe. They're probably the most salient point. He's got a P next to his name. He's got 2 pulled ups in his last 4 starts. But in between that, he's run some absolute belters in really hot races. So, yeah, bit of a Jekyll and Hyde character. I think you'll know your fate very early with the big breakaway. If he pings the first 3 or 4 and he's lit up by the blinkers and he's in good form, you could be in for a good spin. But if what happens at Cheltenham is the writing's on the wall and he fiddles his way over the first 2 and doesn't want to know, that will be that. Cape Gentleman will be horse number 18 on your cards. Quite simply, you've got to have huge question marks about this horse staying. He's yet to win beyond 2.5 miles. I think that came on good ground. All in all, looks out of his depth on all known form, in my view.
All right, move over to Stephen now. We picked another French-sounding name for you, Stephen, to pronounce.
Yeah, yes, thank you for that. Yeah, these next 3 are all sort of very hard to fancy Irish-trained outsiders. The first one, Roy Marge, Joe. He's an 11-year-old. He's had 37 runs over fences. Most of them have come in France for a different yard. 6-time winner. He's a faller in the cross-country. He ran really well last time out behind Longhouse Poet, actually. He travelled all over Longhouse Poet and looked the winner. Traded very short in running, but didn't get past him. So I suppose on that line of form, you can make a case for him. But I think he's a most unlikely stayer and probably not good enough. If the ground got really soft, that would help him. But he's going to be another one the bookmakers will be cheering home. Diol Kern Noel Mead, 13 runs over fences. Only the 1 win. Comes here on the back of a very poor run last time out. When well held, he's got lots to prove. He probably will stay. He's got plenty of form in staying handicaps. He ran a screamer. I think he was 40-1, 1 start back when beating a short head in Ireland. So a repeat of that form would give him some kind of claims, but he's hard to fancy on his latest run. And a Wave of the Sea looks one of the biggest priced outsiders of the lot. I've seen 150. I should think he'll be giving 500 a nudge on the exchanges. Joseph O'Brien, obviously a genius trainer, already in the winners at Aintree this week. 3 from 21 in his career, but pulled up last time, ran really badly, not for the first time at the Cheltenham Festival, and he's never tried beyond 3 miles, so he's very hard to fancy as well.
So yeah, now we're about halfway through the card. I wanted to get your view, Stephen, just quickly on betting in running. You've kind of touched on it a little bit as well. So after the first circuit, could then the market kind of change up, and then would you actually be more interested from a betting point of view looking at the in-running markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Ed said earlier is right. You want to be fairly prominent these days. There's no good being out of the picture, making mistakes in rear. They don't tend to stop as they used to, especially on decentish ground. They will go a good gallop, and I think you want to be in the first 10 probably. So that'd be one thing. Certainly, horses like Delta Work, who last year jumped the first circuit poorly and lost his place and was miles back. If suddenly he's in sort of 6th or 7th, taking to it as he did on the second circuit last year, then he's going to be a horse you're going to want to back. I mean, betting in running does come with perils attached, Joe. I mean, don't forget the live pictures you're going to see on ITV are probably 6 or 7 seconds behind reality. So be careful there. There'll be people flying drones over Aintree trying to pick your pockets. So something to bear in mind.
Absolutely. All right, Ed, let's move on then. The next horse on the card for you.
Aintree's going to be getting attacked from all angles if you watch the television in a moment, isn't it? But yeah, indeed. Right, where are we? Manila Trump, representing the 2011 winning trainer Donald McCain Jr. Of course, Banner Briggs got this job. I can't believe that's over a decade ago. That is crazy. I mean, this horse had a phenomenal novice chase campaign. He rattled up 8 out of 9, I think it was, at one stage last year over fences. Most of those coming in kind of small field, good ground contests around the likes of Ludlow and Perth and etc. in Sedgefield. Hasn't been seen for 293 days, or wasn't seen for 293 days, until having a spin over hurdles at Bangor-on-Dee recently. Who knows, to be honest with you. On the face of it, looks up against it, but knowing the connections, it wouldn't surprise me if he was a little bit of a popular outsider amongst punters. So yeah, had terrific novice chase form in terms of the wins in the category, but off 147, having his first start over fences for a year or so, not for me at the prices. Vanillier. Now, here's a proper Jekyll and Hyde character, horse number 23 on your cards. An individual promised so much after his novice hurdle campaign, which he was a Grade 1 winner at the Cheltenham Festival when he won the Albert Bartlett, having the likes of Statler in behind him on that occasion. That was a really impressive performance. Since then, things just haven't quite gone to plan, have they? Over fences. He's not been the most natural. He won a novice chase on his second start over fences, but that apart, he's yet to win since. However, there were signs of encouragement at Fairyhouse last time out in the Bobby Joe when beaten half a length by Kenboy. I think he's a type of horse that I'd still, even with the modified fences at Aintree, probably want to watch from behind the sofa because he does have the tendency to clout one. And, that could be to his detriment here. But off 147, fairly handicapped, especially on his peak hurdle form. And, yeah, it wouldn't be a shock if he could go well. But I want a fair price on him completing, I think, put it that way. And then horse number 24, Velvet Elvis, over the Thomas Gibney team. Again here, big priced individual, around 50 to 1. It has to be said. A 7-year-old, so light on experience. But a horse who's, again, got a bit of an in and out profile. 2 very disappointing runs in the heart of the winter before bouncing back to beat Manella Crooner and company and Cape Gentleman, who obviously is in this assignment at Fairyhouse back in February. Since then, finished runner-up to Stevens Fancy, any second now in the Webster Cup. Again, I just wonder, are there serious stamina doubts about this horse? Noticeable on 3 or 4 occasions that he's been keen over shorter trips. So whether he could see out this trip or not, I have my doubts.
There you also touch on experience on the National, so I think we're going to come up to one, the next on the card, 25. Stephen, obviously the Manila Times for Rachel Blackmore made history a couple of years ago, so how vital is experience, do you think, going into the National?
Well, Rachel is an absolutely fantastic jockey, full stop. She's already ridden it. She rode a brilliant race on Thursday at Aintree to win one of the handicaps. She's really good round here. As you say, she's got winning form over the fences. Ain't That a Shame is actually the complete opposite. And I put him up as the long shot when he was sort of 40 to 1, 33 to 1 a couple of weeks ago. He's halved in price. I still think he's a fascinating runner. Henry de Bromhead's had a winner this week as well at Aintree. This one is the right age, the right profile for the race. 7 runs over fences, 1 win. That came last time out over 2 mile 4. Landing the odds in really impressive style, right, in a modest race. The one question mark about Ain't That a Shame is stamina, but Henry de Bromhead knows the time of day, and the fact that Rachel's on this one, I think, is quite significant. He's the sort of fly in the ointment horse. He's got no Aintree experience, but he could improve. I think he's very well handicapped if he does stay. So he's certainly one to keep on side of. He's completely fresh and been saved for this race. Unlike a lot of the horses we've been talking about, who've either run at Cheltenham or had runs in these huge fields staying handicaps, this one has not shown his hand to everybody. So he might just not stay, and his jumping he might not take to it. He's never seen Aintree, but when he was sort of 33, 40 to 1, given his connections and the likelihood that Rachel was going to ride him, he was a very interesting proposition. Whether he still is at 20 is probably a bit more marginal. The next one, CORACH Rambler, he's going to be very popular. He landed a wholesale plunge for the second year running at the Cheltenham Festival for Lucinda Russell, who's had more seconds than Oliver Twist already this week at Aintree. She'll be looking for a change of fortune, but her horses are running really well, and she's a brilliant trainer, particularly in the north. CORACH Rambler has got an upwardly mobile profile. He's run 9 times over fences, 4 wins. He does need to be ridden with exaggerated waiting tactics, and I think he is quite quirky in front. And I'm not sure the long Aintree running will definitely suit him. I think the one thing to say about CORACH Rambler is he's one of those horses the bookmakers were trying to make him sort of 6 to 1, 13 to 2 favourite a couple of weeks ago, because he is officially £10 well in after that Cheltenham win on the figures. But personally, I don't think figures count for that much in a race like the Grand National. And I think he is a terrible price, anything single figures. I'd want at least 16 to 1. You don't know for sure he's going to stay. I mean, he shapes like he will, but he's going to be ridden cold out the heat of the race. His jockey, Derek Fox, has been stood down or has stood himself down for most of the last week. Brian Hughes was on the Superstars of Lucinda Russell yesterday, so there's a slight doubt about the jockey. My main thought about CORACH Rambler is I wouldn't be at all surprised he ran really well, but I think he's a terrible price, and I'd put people off him at under 10 to 1, certainly. And the last one for me is Enjoy Dalan, who's around about 100 to 1 chance. He was bought by JP McManus before this race last year, got no further than the first fence, and since then it's sort of been a tale of regression. I mean, he's very hard to fancy. He jumped very badly last time out. Again, he's going to be running for the bookmakers, which is not something you often say about the green and gold colours.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to number 28, Ed.
Yeah, Mr. Incredible, Brian Hayes riding for Willie Mullins. This horse really does have his own ideas about the game, doesn't he? Just the one win in 7 starts over fences, but he's refused to race before. He's clearly got his quirks. He's got a lot of ability to go with it, but he's kind of predicting when it will all fall into place, I suppose. Arrives here on the back of a very solid effort when finishing 3rd in the Kim Muir at the Cheltenham Festival on soft ground. You may know your fate early here. As I said, he has refused to race in the past. He thinks about the game a lot. If he can get off and get in a good rhythm, then he's entitled to give you a good run for your money. And you do get the feeling off his current mark there is more in the locker with just 10-4 on his back. Horse number 29 will be Mr. Coffee for Nicky Henderson, seeking the one race that has evaded him on his illustrious CV. It's a race, 7 Barrows Maestro has never won. Nico de Boinville in the plate, doing 10 stone 4, which, unless all my statistics are being fed are wrong, don't shoot the messenger, but Nico de Boinville is yet to do less than 10-7 in the last 2 years. Well, here he is, getting himself down to 10-4 for a 50 to 1 shot. I suppose it is the Grand National. If you're going to get your weight down, you do it for this. But fascinating to see Nico doing that weight to get the ride here. And again, a perfectly respectable run. We're finishing 3rd to Galliard de Menil in the National Hunt Chase at the Cheltenham Festival last month. Has run some very good races in defeat, including at the Cheltenham Festival the year before when runner-up in the Kim Muir. I suppose the most salient piece of form in relation to this, though, would be last year's Topham, which is obviously over a shorter trip, but it would appear Mr. Coffee really didn't take to the fences. He made numerous mistakes throughout the early part of that assignment, so we'll definitely need to brush up his jumping. But it wouldn't be a shock to see him go well for a long way here, and it is fascinating, as I said, Nico de Boinville doing 10-4. Horse number 30, Cloudy Glen, Charlie Deutsch for Venetia Williams, obviously very popular colours these of the late Sir Trevor Hemmings. Excuse me. And this horse again pulled up last time out behind CORACH RAMBLER at the Cheltenham Festival, but does have some very good bits of form on the CV, including when landing the Ladbrokes Trophy a couple of seasons ago in convincing styles, a 33 to 1 poke, and was runner-up in the Kim Muir at the Cheltenham Festival 2 years ago. So again, a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde profile, as you could see from recent form figures of 1p, 9-3p, but if on a going day, place claims far from forlorn.
Fair enough. And over to Stephen for next.
Yeah, number 31, Hill 16. I think is a lively outsider. I've got on my notes, best of the huge price runners. I've seen 80. I'm sure it'll be at least 150, 200 on the exchanges. Hasn't won a race for 3 years now, nearly. And that was for Nigel Twiston-Davies. But he's run a couple of really, really good races in the Beecher Chase for Sandy Thompson. Latterly finishing 7th. And I watched that run back behind Ashdown Lad, because I wanted to see Ashdown Lad, who runs on Friday. And Hill 16 was quite eye-catching there, running on quite strongly from a very poor position. He's run twice at Aintree, both in the Beecher Chase. I think he finished 2nd in 2021, and he finished 7th last time out. He was poor at Kelso on really testing ground, which should have suited him last time. So he's got to bounce back from that. But cheap pieces on. Ryan Mania booked. Ryan won this race on a 66 to 1 poke. How many years ago was it? 2013 he won the race. So he knows what to do over these fences. Yeah. I think Hill 16 will be one of those rags I'm going to have winning, put it that way. Number 32, Gabby's Cross. Similar sentiments, actually. Henry de Bromhead. Now, Rachel has got off this one and Peter Carberry rides. And I think the market's probably slightly overreacted. Gabby's Cross, the negative is far from certain to stay. I don't think it's ever run beyond 3 mile 1 in his career over fences. But he's only run 10 times in this spear, 2 wins. He ran really well last time out when finishing 3rd. I think you can make a case he's overpriced. I've seen 50. I don't think I want to back him each way because he might just not stay, but I suspect he's a lively rag down the foot of the weights. And number 33, Recite a Prayer. I think this is the last one of Willie Mullins's with very, very little chance. He's been getting progressively worse this season. I think he's extremely hard to fancy.
All right, over to Ed for the next, please. 34 on your card.
Yep, Evers Oscar, the 9-year-old representing Welsh trainer Tim Vaughan, winner at Cheltenham back in the December meeting over 3¼ miles, and then has acquitted himself pretty well since, it has to be said. Didn't run badly at all, went 6th in a hot race at Sandown, and then finished 4th in the Ida Chase. See, that's over a trip not too dissimilar to the Grand National, and ran a very good race there to finish 4th. So not without place hopes, I think it's fair to say. Tongue time for the first time, the visor's on. Does have confirmed stamina in the locker, in my view. I just wonder whether Evers Oscar will be susceptible to something with a bit more raw class, as is my kind of point about this race these days. Our Power, fascinating sort here for the all the Sams here. Sam Thomas, Sam Twiston Davis teaming up with this 8-year-old who arrives here on a hat-trick. In terms of BHA figures, officially £4 well in at the weights. Won a really hot race at Ascot back in October. Not been seen all that much this season. In fact, only once since. And that was when landing a huge prize at Kempton in February. When held up off the pace, made steady headway, and then got up to win on the line. Tactics, as we've discussed, are going to be interesting here. Likes to come from off the pace. That could make things tricky. But 10-2 on his back, arriving on a hat-trick in flying form. Lively each-way claims there for another Welsh-based trainer in Sam Thomas. Horse number 36 on your cards is the son of Yates, Dunboyne, representing Jack Tudor and Gordon Elliott. Blinkers going on for the first time. About this individual who won in heavy ground over 2½ miles at Gorham Park back in November. Been running okay since, including when beaten on the line in the Taistes chase by Carefully Selected back in January, and then was far from disgraced when finishing 4th in the Kim Muir at the Cheltenham Festival last time out, with the likes of Mr. Incredible ahead of him. Tried to make up a lot of ground from the rear on that occasion. Be interesting again to see how what tactics are deployed with Dunboyne. But again, of those at the bottom of the weights, you could easily see him running a big race. For all that, I think there are others in here who are better treated.
And Ed, you touched on there with Dunboyne having blinkers on for the first time. So, Stephen, I just want to get your view on the introduction of headgear in a race like the Grand National. I mean, how big a factor could that be to either help or potentially hinder a horse?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. The market doesn't take that much notice of first-time headgear. I mean, I do think it does occasionally really spark horses back to life. You can sometimes transform the sort of lazy, moody, needs hard driving into a much sweeter model, travelling on the bridle and all the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, it's something to bear in mind. I mean, Aintree is a completely unique test. The fact that I'm coming up to one actually in a minute that's got blinkers on for the first time, and it is quite interesting, especially if you're getting 100-1 or bigger about it working.
I mean, yeah, as well, the idea of 40 horses around, maybe you just need to kind of block them out a little bit, just to kind of keep your focus on the fences in front of you. But yeah, so take it away for the next, you got horse number 37.
Yeah, 37, Frankie de Burley, Peter Bowen. Peter Bowen doesn't have that many winners these days. I think it's fair to say when he does have a winner, it's either at Aintree or Market Rasen. It's usually a big price. Frankie de Burley, I think, is impossible. I don't fancy him at all. He was absolutely legless when he refused at the final flight in the cross country. So it's very hard to see him featuring here. He's 100-1. I think he'll be 3 or 4 times that, really. He's very hard to fancy. He ran a very laboured race. He's not shown anything worthwhile for me, really, since he won the Summer Plate at Market Rasen last year. And I think that's probably going to be the target. They're probably getting his mark right down for another go at that. Number 38 is... Oh, crikey, hang on. Where are we? My screen just... It's Fortescue. Now, Fortescue... Yeah, first time blinkers for a yard that's going well, Henry Daly. I mean, I've backed Fortescue quite a few times in his career. He is moody. He can make a mistake. He can go in snatches and take no interest at all. I think I'm right in saying he's refused to race on one occasion. He's become very well handicapped on some of his form, they've stuck the blinkers on for the National. I mean, it is a bit of a leap of faith. He would need the headgear to work the Oracle, but maybe if he was a huge price, I'd imagine he'd be bigger than 66, much bigger, in fact, on the exchanges. He might be a rag to have winning. He is a couple of pounds out the weights, I believe. Hugh Nugent, perfectly capable jockey, and knows Fortescue quite well. So maybe he'd be one of the better huge priced rags. And number 39, back on the lash, ran abysmal. They thought the ground had gone for him last time out. I think that was in the cross country at Cheltenham. That was behind Belterway. He ran no kind of race. He was beaten very early on. He's very hard to fancy on that. He's ridden by a brilliant jockey, Adam Wedge, and Martin Keeley traditionally starts to go a lot better in the spring, but they'd be straws you were clutching at. Again, very hard to fancy.
And again, Ed, right, take it away, the last horse on the card.
Yeah, Born by the Sea, over a stone out of the weights, was last seen being beaten midfield at the Cheltenham Festival as 150 to 1 poke, and looks massively up against it here. Hard to fancy.
And we'll stick with you then, Ed, for your actual selections for the big one. So take us through your best bet and who you think is going to come second and third.
Yeah, indeed. I'm sticking with Galvin as my best bet to win the Grand National. A confirmed stamina, lovely little warm-up run in the cross country at the Cheltenham Festival. Yes, meets Delta Work on £7 wrong terms, but I think it was very much using that as a tune-up. It's a horse I think I have no problem staying. Ground should be absolutely spot on. Was Fringe Gold Cup class last year, and yeah, he is my main selection. Of others to fill the places, well, I'm going for Lemilos. I think he's ticking every box here, other than just that slight question mark about whether he will see in the 4.25 miles. But Dan Skelter team and having a great season, yard in good form. This horse has won twice this season, including when landing huge prize at Newbury, 150 grand pot back in November. Been trained for this all season. I think Milos is a major player from each way point of view. And then for my third place, I'll go for a lovable rogue here. The big breakaway, headgear on for the first time, absolute Jekyll and Hyde character in the sense that he was awful at Cheltenham last time out, but previously to that, he ran an absolute stormer when runner-up in the Welsh National when trying to concede nearly 2 stone to the winner on that occasion. Blinkers on for the first time. If they have the desired effect, I wouldn't be shocked if on the second circuit he was up there and enjoying himself as 33 to 1 poke. So yeah, Galvin, the Milos, the big breakaway. Hopefully, jumping the last one of those three are in contention.
And Stephen, over to you for your picks as well.
Yeah, my 1, 2, 3. Number one, any second now, I think it's gone out to a really fair price. He's bigger than 20 on the exchanges. There's 16 to 1 around for looking. Play with extra places. He's an Aintree horse. He's fresh. He's only had 3 runs this season. He's a smooth traveller. I think if the ground's good to soft, it'll suit him ideally. I think he's bound to run well. He's better off with Noble Yates. People have written him off because he's got top weight and he's an 11-year-old, but he's trained by Ted Walsh, who knows what it takes to win these races, and I'm sure he'll go really well. My second one is Big Dog, the Big Dog, who's about 25 to 1. I think he'd be a lot shorter if he was trained by a more well-known stable than Peter Fahey. He's got a great record in these kinds of stamina-sapping marathon chases. He's won 3 of his 12 starts. I thought he ran an absolute screamer in the Welsh Grand National at Chepstow over Christmas. He did fall 2 out behind the subsequent Gold Cup winner Galloping Deschamps at Leopardstown, and he was still going really well at the time. So he's been targeted at this race since, kept fresh for it. I think he'll definitely stay. If he takes to the Aintree fences, I think he'll go well. And my outsider was Ain't That a Shame, who unfortunately has halved in price since I sort of tipped him up. Not that that's a related event, but Henry de Bromhead, Rachel Blackmore. We don't know if he'll stay. Don't back him each way. Back him win only at a big price on the exchange because he just might not stay. But I think he's very well handicapped. He's got the right age. He's had the right number of races. He still should be improvement in the tank. And Henry de Bromhead could have run lots of horses in this race. And I think it's significant that Rachel has chosen to ride this one.
And I think, well, you kind of touched on the fact there with the market movement as well. So, I mean, how much of that does that play a factor with you? I mean, yeah, do you kind of ignore it or just you do need to pay attention to it?
Well, the first thing to say is they're all tries, Joe. But the second thing to say is that the Grand National market is an untested, illiquid market. They bet anti-post on it for a year virtually, but it's only in the week or so before and on the day that the whole sort of the right prices emerge. I mean, the prices the bookmakers put up initially, they'll be able to lay them. So it is slightly insignificant that you'll be able to, if you went up 5-1 and you've got 300 betting shops across the country, you'll still take hundreds of thousands of pounds out of them. People are not price sensitive, but on the exchanges, the prices late will be very significant. I think you'll find it'll be at least 10 or 12-1 the field. I mean, we've gone through them, Ed and I mean, I think there's probably 10 that we really don't fancy. I wouldn't say they're impossible. They're very hard to find. That's still 30 runners. There are horses at 50-1 and 33-1 who are big runners. You know, it's not a race full of no hopers. I think it's at least 10 or 12-1 the field. Hopefully, any second now, or Galvin Fred can win for irishracing.com followers.
Perfect. Well, yeah, that wraps it up for our preview of the Grand National. If you've got your top 3 picks, then feel free to comment below. We'll try and feature them if you do get the right selections in an upcoming video. But for now, Ed, Stephen, thanks a lot for your insight. Thank you for watching as well. And if you are going to be gambling on the Grand National, please do gamble safely. We'll be back very soon here on irishracing.com.